First Person Advisors is now a subsidiary of NFP, the fifth largest insurance broker in the world, combining local expertise with access to global capabilities and solutions. Learn more at firstpersonadvisors.com.
Schools don't exist by themselves. Schools exist in a community.
Yeah, I think IPS and Employee ND are really working in lockstep to tackle really tough equity issues that exist in our community.
There is a synergy between the work we do as a community center and the work that IPS does. So we're both focused in on producing academic excellence in kids. We are both wanting families to be resilient, and we both want healthy, thriving communities.
Notice the key word here, community. That's the root, the thread, a foundation built during Aleesia Johnson's days growing up in her Evansville church community, and has helped her guide Indiana's largest school system through a global pandemic.
Moments of crisis can scare us into looking out just for ourselves, or they can inspire us to care for our community. People like those who are a part of Team IPS show us how to find our best selves, and they give me the energy and optimism for what will come next.
Whatever comes next, Aleesia Johnson will always lean back on what came before at the elementary school in Evansville, where her mom taught.
I'm coming home. Tell the world I'm coming.
Loved school, grew up watching her mom teach in the classroom, an educator at heart with a big connection to Southwest Indiana. Get to know Indianapolis Public School Superintendent Aleesia Johnson on this edition of the Business and Beyond podcast. Hello and welcome to the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. I'm Gary Dick. Dr. Aleesia Johnson leads Indiana's largest school district, Indianapolis Public Schools, more than 30,000 students. She has Tijuana Tolliver to thank for planting the seed to become an educator. Tijuana is Aleesia's mom, a longtime educator in the Evansville Vanderburg School Corporation. It was in her mother's classroom where Aleesia began charting her destiny, sitting in on classes, helping mom grade papers, reading anything she could get her hands on. But her career path didn't start out in the classroom. She spent a year in the corporate world before eventually winding up devoting more than 20 years of her life to education, now serving as the first African-American woman to lead IPS. A lot has changed since Aleesia was named IPS superintendent back in the early summer of 2019, 6 months before COVID hit. But she's guided the district through it all and has a game plan to move the needle forward. And I am pleased to be joined by Dr. Aleesia Johnson on the Business and Beyond podcast. Dr. Johnson, a real treat. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, how are things? Happy New Year to you, 2022. I think everyone hopes 2022 is going to be maybe a little better, a little more positive than 2021. How are things?
We are hanging in and hanging on is exactly what I texted someone earlier today. It's been quite a start to 22. So I hope you're right that 2022 tries not to take notes from 2020 and 2021 right, and gives us a little bit of a break.
And IPS, you're back in school, right? Students are in school and you are in person.
We are in school and we are in person and have been for the school year.
Talk about that, because in some, areas of the country, it certainly remains a very, very difficult and controversial issue. I know there's a huge issue in Chicago between the union and mayoral administration there. Talk about that process. And it had to be a lot of difficult decisions, a lot of moving parts to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we started this school year, coming off of last year, we started the year of saying, being able to have school in person is sort of the absolute priority and North Star that we're going to organize ourselves around. So if we know that's the outcome we're trying to reach, then what does that mean for what we need to do to make that a reality? So, the whole year we've had masks, for example, required for our students and staff. We've educated and continue to offer vaccination clinics to our staff, to our students. other mitigation strategies, some of which we had last year, we've actually reinstituted this month because we're in this surge state, with the thinking being, let's take all the steps we can to keep as many students learning in person as possible, even as we're navigating really high community numbers and navigating the surge right now. So that's sort of been the goal. The goal is in-person learning. What are all the things we can put in place to actually make sure that?
You talk about that goal, the North Star being in-person learning. Why, from your perspective as an educator, there's been a lot of talk about damage that has been done by not having in-person learning over the course of the past couple of years. Why is it so important to have that student in-person learning?
Yeah, I think we saw both in our quantitative data, just in terms of how students performed academically, as well as conversations, I had with our students. I have a student advisory council I was meeting with last year virtually and then other kids we talked to just about how much they missed having the opportunity to be in person, to interact with their peers, to interact with their teachers. That isn't replaceable. And so that's not to say that there aren't circumstances where you have to pivot to a virtual learning situation and make sure people are able to stay safe. So it doesn't have to be just so much of an either or proposition, but it does mean we know, hearing from our kids, seeing the data, that when they're able to be in person, there's a better experience.
Yeah. How about the challenges that you have faced in a district like IPS, a huge district, very diverse, that has to add some, complicating factors and difficulty to trying to make do in a very difficult environment?
Certainly. We have certainly faced a lot of challenges over the course of the last couple of years, and really over the course of the history of the district. It's a blessing that we're the district that carries the name of our city. That means something that's really important. But also, I would argue that comes with another level of, scrutiny and responsibility about what we're doing and how we are serving a really diverse community. So you can imagine we have Meridian Kessler within our district boundary, just like we have 42nd and Post or Martindale Brightwood. So really sort of well-resourced communities, and then communities that have been under-resourced for so long. So our job is to figure out, how do we serve everyone well? Not the same, but how does everyone get what they need so that all of our kids can be successful? And certainly that presents lots of challenges.
Yeah. You were named superintendent at IPS, and then what was it, 6 months later or so, the pandemic hit. So you were not only on that first superintendent's job, big responsibility, and then here comes this thing called a global pandemic. What was that? What were those early days like?
When we came back from being at home after we were all sort of in that lockdown period, I walked into my conference room. It was just like, had these vivid images of the war room that it had been
right.
in the week leading up to that March date when we sort of all shut it down. Like, it was literally every single day, what new piece of information do we have, and how do we make sense of it, and what do we do? And so it was very much that war room feel. Yeah. I think the benefit that this happened early in my career, if you can call it that, is that every superintendent, every leader was actually in the exact same place. No one had navigated anything like this before. So there was no level of sort of arrogance or ego or I know what to do, just listen to me. It was sort of like everyone being like, okay, what idea do you have? What are you trying? It doesn't matter if you're 1 or you're 20, we were all in it together trying to figure it out.
Was there a moment, I mean, maybe there were multiple moments, but when you really thought, boy, how are we going to get this done? And you certainly weren't alone, but how are we going to get this done? How are we going to make this work?
I think, one of those first moments was when it was clear that what we thought was maybe a couple of weeks and we just needed sort of a Band-Aid solution to get through being, all at home, clearly became, this is going to be a longer term situation that we're facing. Mm-hmm. That was a scary moment. For example, at that point, our district didn't have a laptop or a device for every student. So it was okay. Not only do we need to figure out how to get how to educate students, but how to get the tools to even get to a place where we could educate them to connect teacher and student every day. Yeah. And so the amount of just logistical, technical planning, we became a logistics company for a number of to figure that out. It was certainly overwhelming.
Yeah. In some respects, as you think back on it, in the reasons you got into education, I guess maybe there was some moments where that, yeah, in a kind of a strange sense, this is why I got into education to really make a difference in children's lives, even in the most challenging circumstances.
Yeah, for certain. I mean, growing up, that was the message, to me and my cousins and my brother and all of us, from my grandparents, from my parents, is like the importance of education.
Mm-hmm.
How education is the one thing you can get that no one can take from you, and that you can leverage that experience and all of that you gain to make a difference and an impact on others. And in fact, it's your responsibility to do that. So it is a big part of what drives me to do the work. And I think in this particular moment in time, going through that has also been for me a proof point of what is actually possible. So oftentimes, like public education is as a sector is bureaucratic, and we're a big organization. It's really hard to make fast pivots. And yet we were able to do things that, had you asked us a year before, we would have said, that just can't be done in that amount of time. And yet we did it. So I have to continue to remember we have these very real proof points of what is possible. So we shouldn't put these limits on ourselves, because in fact, they don't really exist.
Yeah. I want to talk about your early days after the break here in a minute, growing up in Evansville in Southwest Indiana, how you got to Indianapolis. But how about before we go to the break, your view, COVID notwithstanding, the state of IPS? How would you assess the state of the district?
Well, I would say we are on the rise, and obviously I'm biased in that. But when I look at our schools, the students we serve, the people who we have who work in our district, I look at how the needle is moving. We know it's a marathon, not a sprint, to get to the outcomes we want to get to for our students. But there are so many positive indicators that demonstrate we are moving in the right direction, that I think saying, on the rise and rebuilding stronger, which is an actual sort of plan and process we're going through right now, is absolutely an astute and accurate description of the district.
How would you, because I think one of the challenges you and your predecessors have faced is perception. You mentioned on the rise, and there are a number of schools within the district doing tremendous things, but there, over the years was this narrative that was not necessarily positive about IPS. How important is the messaging to what you do and what the district does?
It's so critical. It's so important. We've done, surveys that demonstrate and show us the internal perception can be strong, but then outside of the organization, we still have work to do to sort of pivot that perception of IPS. I see a big part of my job as being the chief cheerleader and communicator of the great work happening in IPS, and it's happening every single day. And so it's hugely important that we, one, are able to communicate well, to communicate clearly, to show off and not be scared to tell the great stories about things happening in our district, and to make sure that folks see our students and know our students for the incredible human beings that they are. And that's a big part of my job.
How important, in your view, is IPS, the IPS success, the success story, to the future of Indianapolis, in particular downtown, but Indianapolis in general, as the city goes out and tries to attract new investment, new companies, people who want to live, work, and play here? How important is IPS to that equation?
It's critically important. So we say, as the city goes, so our district goes; as our district goes, so our city goes. We know in Indiana, we are struggling, quite frankly, to attract or retain the talent that we have in our state. So we hear about, brain drain. You have incredible people who are coming to great institutions like Purdue or IU or Ball State, and in a number of cases aren't choosing to stay here to build their lives and build their families. So we know that, one, if we can be the school district, the destination school district, that when someone Googles Indianapolis, not only do they see the cool things happening in the cultural and arts sector, the cool job opportunities, they also see this really amazing school system that can deliver a good education as they think about their future. So all of those things are connected, which is why, I also talk about, I say stronger together. And I say that all the time on Twitter as a hashtag, but I really mean it, that it really will take all of us collectively to make this be the place we want it to be for everybody.
Do you think the business community gets that and understands that? Has it been a good relationship between the district and the business community to help make those important things happen?
It's been growing. It really has been in a very positive way. So I've been engaged, for example, in the business equity for Indy work that's been happening across the city. The Indy Chamber has been a partner of the district as we've thought about how we both best leverage our resources and continue to invest in our teachers. They understand our students and our city. We want to keep them here. We want them to be able to help make our city better and be great business owners and great employees and employers in the future. We've also gotten really focused on what the post-secondary experience for our kids is. So we have a whole team of people who every day are just thinking about, well, yeah, our direct job is K-12, but quite frankly, we have to connect that to our work partners and make sure that we're all aligned. So it's been actually really cool for those conversations to be happening more and more and for those partnerships and connections to be building.
Well, certainly education is in Aleesia Johnson's DNA, really ingrained at an early age. Growing up in Evansville, Southwest Indiana, we will talk about that and also the future of education, a number of other topics when the Business and Beyond podcast returns. Stay with us.
First Person Advisors is now a subsidiary of National Financial Partners, the fifth largest insurance broker and consultant in the world. Develop your total reward strategies all in one place with the combination of First Person's local expertise and NFP's global resources and integrated solutions. Learn more at firstpersonadvisors.com.
Welcome back to the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. My guest this week is Aleesia Johnson. She is the superintendent at IPS Schools, the state's largest school district, and leading the district through a very challenging time with the pandemic and other issues. And Aleesia, like I said earlier, I tell everybody thanks for being here, but especially to you because you have so much on your plate right now. So I appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's go back to Evansville, right? It is where it all started. So tell me, what was it like growing up in Evansville?
Yeah, I had a great childhood and experience. So most of my extended family is there in Evansville and still there. So, my parents got married very young. So when they first moved to their first home, it was literally across the yard from my grandparents. So I spent a lot of time with my paternal grandparents, and then my maternal grandparents were right across town. So lots of time with them as well. Cousins, all over the city who I got to spend a lot of time with. So for me, Evansville means family and means getting to spend, good quality time with the people who I love the most.
Now, you mentioned cousins. I've got a little scoop. I know had learned earlier, one of your cousins is the great Anthony Calhoun, correct? AC, the sports guy extraordinaire at Wish TV here. I when I learned that, I thought that was great. And your personality seemed to be very similar too.
Oh, well, thank you. I think that's a compliment.
It is. Yeah.
Just kidding. He's amazing. And yeah, so we are cousins and actually grew up in church together. So I would see him every Sunday at church. And he probably doesn't want me to share, but youth choir together. And
if you could get some video of AC singing, that would be priceless.
It would be, and he probably disowned me as well. But you know what? I'll do a little digging.
Good stuff. So obviously, it sounds like church and faith and family just extremely important to you growing up.
Yeah, absolutely. So I come from a family, I say of servant leaders. So my grandmother was my Sunday school teacher growing up on my dad's side. My grandfather, ended up being a deacon in our church. My grandfather on my mom's side was a pastor for 50 plus years at a church. Her brother is a pastor. Her sister is a minister. So it's just all of that is in our family. And then lots of teachers and folks who are just servant leaders. So that foundation of faith, of family, and of service is sort of the key anchors in my growing up that, have become my guiding lights, if you will, as I do my job and sort of live my life, making sure my life reflects those values.
Well, and it sounds like you were a doer in grade school, high school, very active in a lot of different events. What did you always want to be busy? You like sports? It looked like you were a student council, very active in the really the fabric of the schools you attended in Evansville.
Yeah, really busy. I think that's the strategy for my parents was, the least idle time you have, the less time you have to go off and do something that maybe won't set you up for success. So my brother and I, they kept us both very engaged and plugged in, whether it was athletics or other activities. We were on the go basically all the time.
What mentors did you have, or could you identify? Most people have a number of mentors over their lifetime, but as you think back to those early years and the formative years, important mentors?
Yeah, mentors or teachers or people who I just saw that I was like, wow, they are the kind of person I want to be. I think, what are those people for me? Certainly my grandparents played that role of both grandparents who love you and think you could do no wrong, but also people who lived their lives in ways where they didn't sort of wear it on their sleeves, but they just embodied and lived lives that demonstrated their values and their service to others. And I always really admired them for that. And so my grandfather particularly, because he was also an educator and also, a first in many ways as a Black man in our community, was someone whose advice and insight I cherished, up until the time that he passed away. And so I consider him my sort of biggest mentor or aspirational figure in my life. And then over time in college, grad school, now as a professional and superintendent, certainly there are people now who I know, in my kitchen cabinet who I can call, who will give me the truth straight. Not just what I want to hear, but what I need to hear, but they do it from a place of love. And so it's awesome to have those kind of people who you can rely on.
Well, you didn't have to look far to find those mentors when you think about really important family members. Your mom was a teacher, right? An educator. And I've got to assume that's where that fire, that passion for education really started many years ago.
Yeah, it was cool. She was a middle school teacher, and I actually ended up being a middle school educator my whole career. Funny, she retired for 8 months, and she's now back filling in a principalship currently. So she just couldn't get enough. So yeah, going into her classroom and seeing the relationships, that's what I most vividly remember, the relationships she was able to build for her students. Ironically, one of her students who she became really close to and stayed close to through her college years and on actually became a teacher I hired when I was a principal. So There was this very cool full circle moment of a student who my mom was the assistant principal for. I ended up hiring to be a teacher at a school where I was the assistant principal. And so it's just those kinds of relationships and seeing the power that teachers have and the difference they can make in the lives of their students that was something that I didn't think I was gonna do, honestly, when I started my career, but I couldn't shake it. It was just something about that was remarkable to me.
But you kind of, as I understand it, you kind of dove in early in your mom's classroom. You volunteered to grade papers and to actively get involved. So what do you remember about those early days of sitting in the classroom and kind of checking out what was going on?
Yeah, Gary, I was a nerd. I still am in a lot of ways. So I love school, my own personal experience in school. I loved school. So I loved going to, my mom's actual school and being in the actual classroom and looking at bulletin boards, or she would give me back in the day, the little graders that you could kind of slide and see what the score should be. And I'd be able to write that on the paper as she was grading them. And that was just a cool thing to sort of be not just experiencing school as a student, but getting to experience the behind the scenes as a teacher's kid.
So did you, when you went to college, talk about college where you went undergrad, and was your intention heading into college that you would be an educator?
Yeah, so I went to Agnes Scott College. It's a small women's college, and I went there. I did not have the intent to go in education. I knew I wanted to be in a service-oriented profession, but I wasn't quite sure what that was going to be. I majored in psychology and African American studies and left there and actually went and worked at IBM for a year. So I knew I was sort of interested in that service orientation. I knew what appealed to me, like understanding people and relationships and how those things worked was super appealing to me. That's my majors. But being a teacher wasn't necessarily what I had sort of scoped out in my life plan.
And actually, once you graduated, you started out in the corporate world, right?
I did that. And honestly, my dad was like, hey, so you're graduating college and you've got a car payment coming to you that I've been paying right now. And you've got to live someplace and we're not paying your rent. So you need a job. And I had gone randomly to a career center and IBM was there doing interviews. And I was like, I don't think I want to work here, but I'm just going to like practice my interview skills. And I ended up getting an offer. And, my dad was like, it's IBM. Like you don't have anything else right now on the books. So you need to take that job. So I did. And it wasn't the fit that I anticipated it probably wasn't going to be, though I met great people, but ended up pivoting after a year and going to graduate school for social work, which was definitely.
Yeah. Was there a kind of an aha moment or a moment there at IBM who said, you know what, this is not for me. I need to make a pivot.
Yeah, I was an inside sales rep. So I was selling IBM technology to small healthcare companies on the West Coast, like via phone, just calling clinics and hospitals. And, if they had an old server, for example, it was my job to sort of talk to them about why they needed to upgrade and try to sell them some new technologies. People who know me now are like, we could never imagine you doing that. But I did for a year. But I think, it got to the point where I was like, I'm just not finding this fulfilling. I've met great people, we have fun at work, but this just isn't like fulfilling me in terms of purpose, like life purpose. So I applied to grad school and got in kind of at the last minute and quickly pivoted to move up to Michigan to go to grad school in Ann Arbor.
Yeah. Got into teaching, obviously, was administration, was a superintendent's job, kind of in the back of your mind, what you wanted, what you aspired to have a leadership role?
Also not in the life plan. Once I got into education, the principalship was really what I was most interested in. And that was what I really was aspiring to. So I taught for 6 years. And at that point was thinking, okay, I really want to be able to go into school leadership. So started to take some different roles that would prepare me for that. So that's really where I kind of saw my journey going was to be a principal. And I loved being in schools and loved being with kids and didn't want to get too far removed from kids and from students. But, never say never, because here I am in a job that I didn't think was kind of in the stars, but am loving it and enjoying getting to do the work even on really hard days.
Yeah, it is a very big job with great challenges. As you look at education in general, not just at IPS, but just education in general, your thoughts, where is education headed? There's so much talk, and as I do things, with the business community and well, just so much discussion about it and the value of education, and not just students going on to 4-year institutions, but maybe it's a junior college or community college or right into the workplace. Big workforce issues out there. As you look at the role of education, what do you see? Because obviously it's evolved over the years.
Yeah, and I think, that's a question we will continue to ask ourselves. We've asked ourselves a number of times, and there's sort of different iterations on the role education should play. I mean, my take on that is ultimately my job is to ensure I'm leading a system where when students leave us, they are prepared and equipped with the knowledge, the mindset, the competencies, the skills to go do what it is that allows them to live the life they want to live. So to your point, that could be going directly into the workforce, and getting a job that will allow them to take care of themselves and their families, if that's what they so choose. It can mean going to a 4-year institution, if that's what they so choose. What I don't want to be the case is students go through 13 years of time in the K-12 world and actually can't choose the future because they don't have the knowledge or the skills or the competencies to do so. So for me, education is about unlocking whatever it is that you desire to do, and you're equipped with the skills and the knowledge to go and do that thing. You have choice. And I think too many times we see situations play out where I have to take this job because I need to make some money and I don't have either the skills or the competencies or whatever to go and do something different. So now I'm really limited, not because I want to be limited, but because I don't yet have the skill set to go and do something different. And it's our job in K-12 to make sure that foundation is strong so people aren't limited in that way.
Do you think there needs to be, for lack of a better term, education or awareness from parents and others, kind of the community, understanding what education is about, and the fact there are paths directly from high school into the workplace, directly to other areas, that it's not just a one size fits all? There seems to be an evolving mindset that, yeah, that's true, we need to do that. But do you sense that?
I do. I think there's a couple of things that our community has to continue to be aware of. I think one, that there isn't a one size fits all, and that you have to be careful about that. You don't want to, track or say, well, if this kid comes from this neighborhood and looks this way, then they should only go into vocational or career tech. But if this kid comes from this neighborhood, then they should obviously go to a 4-year institution. We have to be careful that we're not stereotyping and kind of tracking kids into particular places based on whatever, random characteristic we might choose. But I think people need to understand the job is to make sure, again, kids can choose whatever path they believe is right for them and their families. So we should have to do that. I think the second thing our community has to be aware of is the number of things that schools are asked to do for the community and as a community service. So for example, we've seen in COVID, the first question I asked myself, the very first one was about, okay, well, we know for a number of our students, like consistent meals come from their school, getting breakfast, getting lunch every day. So how are we going to ensure that our students have access to meals? For a number of our students, their health services is coming through the school. A number of our schools have pantries to serve our families who may have a need for additional food in their home. So it's not just reading, writing, arithmetic in schools, or particularly in schools in the system like where we serve. It is, how do we think about the physical health and medical health needs of our kids? How do we think about making sure that they're well nourished? How do we think about helping them find stability, or their families find stability if they're having to move around a lot? So all of those things impact what happens to schools. And we ask our schools, again, particularly in a community that what we serve here in Indianapolis, to do a whole awful lot before we even get to the education part. And sometimes I don't feel like that's fully appreciated.
Yeah, great point. And kind of bringing it full circle in terms of that talent pipeline, which is such a challenge in Indiana, and the ultimate output, if you will, or the ultimate success at IPS has a direct impact on that whole workforce pipeline.
Absolutely. You need great people who are willing to go into classrooms and be those teachers who are building those relationships and having that lifetime impact on students, which means from an employer and workforce vantage point, it has to be an attractive career to take on. You have to know that you can take care of yourself and your family through the compensation you receive. You have to know that your work is valued, that you're appreciated. All of those things matter. And certainly, at the state level, at the local level, we find ourselves in some challenging situations in that regard.
Aleesia Johnson is the superintendent of Indianapolis Public Schools. Alessia, thank you for taking the time. Thanks for your leadership. You've got a very important, a very difficult job, but your leadership, you're a dynamic leader, which I think is what IPS, all school systems need. Thanks for taking the time, and good luck going forward.
Well, thanks, Gary. Thanks so much for the invitation. I appreciate it.
And thank you for joining us on this edition of the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. It's a weekly conversation with achievers in business, sports, entertainment, and beyond. And you can download it at Apple or wherever you find your podcast. I'm Gary Dick. We'll see you next time.